Okay, hello. How to deal with a suicide. So, this subject is close to my heart because I was affected by someone who committed suicide, and that happened to be my first love, my true love. So, lately I've been hearing, I guess I'm more aware of it, but I've been noticing some people have been experiencing losing people to suicide. And so, I wanted to talk about this and maybe, someone will be helped, by what I share and maybe, what I experience. But so this is only from my experience, and let that be clear. I am not a psychologist or a psychiatrist. I am just someone who experienced this, and this is how I helped heal myself from this process. And these are just tips that you can look out for. So the first thing I'll say is that be prepared for a spiritual shift in perspective, meaning for me, I was never Christian and I was never religious, but it didn't mean that I wasn't aware of what a lot of people say about when someone commits suicide. That they're going to hell, they're held in purgatory, or they're not, something about the process being this negative process. And for me, that was really, really difficult to understand. And when you lose someone that you love, all that stuff gets thrown out the window. It gets completely thrown out the window because you're looking for the truth. And so I will say most of my spiritual journey, my recent spiritual journey, really came from me looking for the truth because I had to truly understand what happened. And so be prepared for that. When you really, really love someone, you're going to look for the truth. You're not really just going to accept anything that you hear. And and usually what you'll find is that this whole time people have just been accepting anything that they hear because they haven't really had to deal with it internally. Okay, so be prepared for that. Also, so the second thing you need to be prepared for is that you have to talk to anyone you can talk to, because what I found, and that was kind of the most shocking thing, is that the people I thought I'd be able to talk to, the people who maybe I considered to be my great friends, were not available to me. And it was people who, they were still friends, but they had either gone through a similar situation, they understood, or somehow there was something in their heart that they could just open up and listen to me and let me say what I needed to say and cry and do all the things I needed to do. And that was a really big shock for me. So you talk to who you can, because I can say there were people who came out later and said, well, I wasn't there for you because I didn't agree with the way he died. Yeah, there are some people who, because suicide is such a touchy subject for them, they won't even touch you. They'll stay away from you because it's too much. But when you're going through the grief process, the mourning process, you don't have time for right or wrong or morality or anything like that. It just hurts. And you need people to be there for you. And so be prepared to understand. You need to talk to whoever you can talk to. And then I'll say, there's your peers that you're talking to and your friends and your loved ones who are there for you, and sometimes strangers. I can say some of the best conversations I had were strangers, people who I didn't even know, who for some reason I could just open up to and they listened to me. The guy on the plane when I was going to the funeral, I can just give a list of just people who just showed up for me. So be open to that. Do not close the door to that. And then I will say that in your healing process, it is helpful to see a professional. So I went to two different kinds of professionals. One, I went to a psychic, and she was a great psychic. She wasn't the kind of psychic that predicted things or did any of that kind of stuff. She just did mostly tarot, but that I wasn't even going to ask about it, but I did. When I asked about, his situation, that was the best reading I could have gotten. It carried me as far as giving me peace. So that was a great reading, and it helped me understand death and the transition a lot more. And then, so she helped me, and then I went to see a professional psychologist, and I sat down with her and we talked, and she was amazing as well. And I honestly am so grateful that I had both of those experiences. So I think it's so more important to see a professional. If you can see a professional for however long, for the psychic it was one time, and for the other person it was one time. But those two times of sitting down and talking to these people who maybe have dealt with people coming in, more than once, it made a gigantic difference in my life and my ability to grieve and mourn in a healthy way. Um, the other thing is that when you are the third thing is when you are dealing with someone who had dealing with that pain, you start to contemplate life in general. You try to figure out if it's important, and some people don't want to admit that people who who lose someone through suicide become almost suicidal. Not to say that you will take your life, but all of a sudden your mind opens up to it because you're trying to figure out how did this person's mind open up to it. So that is something that you have to be aware of. And so you have to actively look for things to live for. While you're going through your grief, you need to look for things to live for, whatever it is. I know for me, I just started to do lots of fun activities. I did things that I knew I loved. That's why I have hobbies to this day. That's why I have certain things that, aren't dependent upon any career choice or anything. It's just something fun to do. That's why I dance. That's why I do certain things, because I realize you have to have things to live for. And if you don't have children or certain responsibilities that kind of bind you, which I don't have, you need to make sure you have those things. And even if the children are enough, I know that can be true for some people. You have to have things to live for. The other thing, let me see, make sure I covered everything. Stay away from judgmental people. That's really, really important. And I hinted to it before, but when you really, really love someone, and when I say love someone, I'm talking about unconditionally, your love doesn't and shouldn't change. Meaning, unconditionally means without conditions, you love this person. Okay? That means it should not change no matter what they do and how they decide to transition and how that process happened. That's not for you to judge, and you need to be clear about that. And so it's very helpful to stay away from judgmental people, because that right there can really, really bring you down and really, I would say, almost kind of depress you. And people judge for whatever reason they need to judge. And that's really not for you to figure out. But once you realize that, you need to kind of step away from it. And I had to do that. And in that sense, there were friends that I lost, or there was a great distance that happened. And though they may not understand why, it's because I understood that this thing that I'm going through it's a big thing. It's not small. It just really isn't a big thing, and you really need that positive support around you. You need unconditional love around you, and if these people are not able to give that to you, you really have to step away. I could say the biggest lessons that I learned through suicide is unconditional love. It pushed me and it forced me to go there. If I had thought I had grasped it before, I didn't, because me having to go through that process, that is really the biggest thing that I've learned in this whole process. And that's the other thing. Be prepared for the lessons. There's a lesson in everything. And if you open your heart to the lesson, you will learn so much about life and transition and everything. I would say that I am here today doing the work that I do, honestly, because my friend committed suicide. My first love committed suicide, and that is what propelled me to do everything that I do today. And it's because I had to force myself to see that there's so much more to what this thing called life, and I had to understand it, and I had to open my heart to it, and I had to be unconditional about it. That is really why I'm here, and this is why I do the work that I do. So these are all the things that, if you're dealing with suicide, if you're dealing with the grief of it, just open your heart and realize that it's going to hurt. It sucks. It sucks greatly. And I don't care how spiritual you are, I don't care how advanced you are, it's still going to suck because you're a human being. And when you lose someone, that physical loss is a physical loss, and you naturally are going to grieve through it. That's just how it is. And that cannot be ignored, and it cannot be, almost kind of spiritualized away. That's a real process. But in the midst of that, you're also going to start opening up to that other aspect of life, that aspect that maybe you can't see as readily. So that's the process. These are the things that I have to share. I hope they're helpful to anyone who's dealing with that right now. And if you do have any more questions, something that I hadn't covered, please feel free to email me at kikisinza@gmail.com. You can visit my website at kikisinza.com. But I'm happy to help. I'm very happy to help because it's a subject and it's a situation that's very dear to my heart, and I would not be where I am today, honestly, if I hadn't gone through that experience and that grief and that mourning. Okay? All right. And that love. Taking love to a whole other level for me. All right. Bye, everyone. Take care.